Okay, so get this. Today, we're diving into a text that reads like, I don't know, a training manual for reaching enlightenment.
Oh, real.
Yeah, but with ancient wisdom instead of like, burpees and all that.
Okay.
Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. Ever heard of it?
Rings a bell. Refresh my memory.
So it's this dialogue, right, between Shiva, the Hindu deity, and his consort, Devi.
Okay, I'm intrigued, and you brought me this text
And
because,
besides that, it kind of promises to unlock these secrets of consciousness. I mean, who wouldn't want that?
right.
It's the approach, you know? Shiva's not just laying down the law. It's like he's offering Devi and I guess us by extension, these 112 techniques to like experience enlightenment firsthand.
It's interesting how this text presents this really practical, almost, you could even say scientific approach to
Exactly.
something as profound as, enlightenment.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, but before we go any further, I have to admit this word tantra always kind of throws me off.
Sure.
Can we, I don't know, demystify that a little?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can forget the incense and the sitar music.
Right.
We're not in a movie montage here. Tantra, when you really get down to it, it's about experiencing the universe,
Hmm.
the energy that flows through everything, and your place in all of that. You can think of it like a toolkit, I guess, for understanding reality, but like through actually experiencing it, not just reading about it or what.
So less about just believing things and more about like, here's something, try it and see what happens.
Precisely.
I like that.
And what I think is so interesting is that a lot of these techniques, especially the ones about the breath, science is sort of validating them centuries later.
Yeah, you're right. The text kept mentioning this word prana, which I think is that the vital life force, right?
Yeah.
And Shiva seems to be saying like, hey, you're breathing this incredible power every second. Learn how to use it.
And he doesn't just mention it. Prana is actually like central to so many of the techniques. Like, for example, Sutra 2, where he compares like moving your consciousness to a spider moving through its web. And he suggests that we can use our breath to change our state of being, to
Mm.
like get to different levels of consciousness in the same way the spider uses its silk to move around.
Okay, that's a cool image. So it's like our breath is what connects us to these other states of awareness. And I don't know, I can almost feel the possibilities just, I don't know, opening up.
That's the beauty of this text. It speaks to this, I think, intuitive understanding we all have, this like feeling that there's more to reality than we can see.
Totally. But it's not all breathing techniques, is it?
Right.
I mean, some of the stuff in here is pretty out there, like influencing reality with our minds. That sounds like, I don't know, a superpower or something.
It does, right. But the text encourages us to come at these techniques with an open mind, not just blindly believing it. Osho, in his commentary, even tells this story about one of Shiva's disciples who, just by focusing on, get this, the feeling of sucking, experiences this profound shift in consciousness.
Okay, now that one I have to hear more about. It makes you wonder how much potential our awareness really has, you know?
Exactly. And, we might not all be trying to get mystical powers or anything,
Right.
but these techniques, they give us a look into how our minds work, how powerful focused awareness can be.
Okay, so even if we approach this old text with a little bit of healthy skepticism, there's still a lot we can get out if it.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so interesting.
Okay.
We're about to look at this text that's been guiding people for centuries.
Right.
And who knows, we might even find some practical advice for our lives today.
Okay, I am so ready. So where do we start? I mean, 112 techniques, it's a lot.
Well, we could start with one that's kind of foundational to a lot of them. Understanding how powerful the breath is and all the like subtle changes within it. Osho talks about this idea of the G spot.
Okay, now you got my attention.
It's about those moments of stillness, like between the in-breath and the out-breath.
Okay, tell me more about this G spot.
So think about it this way. Have you ever noticed how just changing the way you breathe can like totally change how you feel when you're stressed?
Oh, for sure. Like when I'm freaking out, if I can remember to slow down my breathing, it's like my whole body just relaxes.
Exactly. That's you tapping into the power of your breath. Now imagine you could refine that awareness even more
Okay.
to those tiny pauses between each inhale and exhale. That's where the G spot is.
So it's like those little moments of stillness, they're the key to some other level of awareness.
Exactly. And that's really just the beginning. The Vijnana Bhairava Tantra goes on to describe how if you can manipulate prana, that vital life force, you can have even more profound experiences.
Okay, you've definitely got me hooked. What exactly does that mean, manipulate prana?
Think of it like consciously controlling the energy moving through your body.
Hmm.
Tantra says that if you can master that, you can influence not just how you feel inside, but maybe even the world outside of you.
Now that's a bold claim.
It is. And it's something we'll unpack a bit more as we, get deeper into this. But before we do, there's another technique I want to mention. Sutra 7, where Shiva talks about moving your, what he calls subtle breath to the heart.
Right, the one about like mastering your dreams and even death. It's a lot, even with my new understanding of the G spot, I'll be honest.
I get it. And it's worth mentioning that there are a lot of different interpretations of these techniques, but the main idea here is that you're consciously directing prana to different parts of your body and even outside of it.
So it's like we can take control of our own energy. Instead of just letting it run on autopilot, we can decide where it goes.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And the idea that you can use prana to influence your dreams or even death might sound a little out
It's
there,
just a bit, yeah.
but it really highlights this fundamental idea in Tantra that what's happening inside of us and what's happening in the world around us, those things are connected.
So by changing our internal state, like by mastering the G spot or, directing the subtle breath, we
Hmm.
could potentially be changing the world around us.
That's the idea.
Hmm.
And it's an idea that even modern science is starting to explore. Like, look at quantum physics and all the research on consciousness.
Wow.
But way before any scientists were measuring energy fields, you had these tantric practitioners developing techniques for working with this stuff.
It's kind of mind-blowing that these ancient practices might hold the answers to mysteries that science is just now starting to figure out. But let's bring it back down to earth for a sec.
Sure.
How do we actually use this stuff in our everyday lives?
Right, and that's a question that Osho talks about in his commentary. He says that while those bigger goals of Tantra, like being able to control your dreams or whatever, they're definitely interesting. The real power of these techniques is that they can change your everyday experience.
So it's less about becoming superhuman and more about, I don't know, becoming more human.
Exactly. And that leads us to another really fascinating technique that Shiva describes, Sutra 14, where he talks about visualizing your spine.
Okay, I think I remember this one. It's about like imagining this thread of energy running through your spine, right? But how does that fit in with everything else we've been talking about?
Well, think about it. We're constantly bombarded by stimulation. Our attention's pulled in a million directions at once. It's so easy to get disconnected from our bodies, to just live in our heads all the time.
Oh, yeah, tell me about it. I spend way too much time staring at screens.
Exactly. And that's where this technique comes in. When you visualize your spine, you're bringing your awareness back into your body,
Mm.
back to right here, right now.
So it's like a way to ground yourself, be more present.
Exactly. And it's something that can affect every part of your life. When you're more in touch with your body, you're less likely to get caught up in all those anxious thoughts. You're more present when you're with other people. You're more able to just enjoy being alive.
Yeah, okay. I can see how that would be super valuable these days. It's like a way to be mindful, but like in your body.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's a technique that anybody can use. But it's just one example of how the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra gives us real tools that we can use to deal with the challenges of, modern life.
It's interesting because on the surface, this text might seem kind of out there, kind of esoteric, but it's actually full of wisdom that anyone who wants to live a more conscious, more embodied, and ultimately more fulfilling life could benefit from.
Precisely. And we've only scratched the surface.
All right, so we're back. And I gotta say, I am ready to dive deeper into this whole G-spot thing.
Okay.
Because it sounds like we're not just talking about, like, taking deep breaths, but actually finding some kind of control panel within the breath itself.
Yeah, it's about like becoming aware of those little changes within your breath. Those points where the energy shifts.
Oh,
Think about like driving a car. You don't just like floor it and hope for the best.
right. You gotta know when to shift gears. Find that sweet spot for a smooth ride.
Exactly. And just like a car has all those different gears, our breath or prana
Mm.
has these different levels, like different intensities.
Mm.
And that G spot, that pause between breathing in and breathing out, it's like the clutch. That's where we can shift from one state to another.
So by, like, tuning into that pause, we get more control over, I don't know, our inner world. Like
Yeah.
choosing which ear we want to be in.
Exactly. And this goes right back to what Shiva's saying in Sutra 2. He's not just saying to, breathe deeply. He's talking about being super aware of all the little mechanics of your breath.
It's making me think about those times when I'm feeling anxious and, if I can remember to slow down my breathing, it really does help. Is that like tapping into this G-spot idea?
Absolutely. You're basically downshifting your nervous system, into a more chilled out state. And the Vijnana Bhairav Tantra says that's just like one tiny example of what we can do when we really master this G-spot thing.
Okay, now I'm really curious. If slowing down your breath can do that, what happens when we master those transitions at like a deeper level? What other, I don't know, gears are there?
Right. That is the question. And it's something that Tantra really encourages us to, figure out through experiencing it ourselves. Remember that story about the disciple who had that big shift in consciousness just from focusing on the feeling of sucking?
Yeah.
Might seem random, but it shows that even those, like, everyday things
Mm.
can become doorways to deeper awareness if we approach them the right way.
So it's about taking that same focus that we're using for the G spot and applying it to like everything, looking for those little shifts and changes.
Yes. Tantra says that kind of awareness is like a muscle we can strengthen, and our breath is one of the best tools we've got. But that's not all. The Vijnana Bhairav Tantra also talks about other ways to use prana, like we touched on earlier, Sutra 7, where Shiva talks about moving the, what was it, subtle breath to your heart.
Right, right. The one about like controlling your dreams and even like death. That one's still a little out there for me, even with my new appreciation for the G spot.
I hear you. And it's important to remember that people understand these techniques in different ways, but the main idea is that you're actively directing prana to different parts of you and even beyond.
So we're basically taking the wheel of our own energy. Instead of just letting it run wild, we can learn to like steer it.
Exactly. And yeah, manipulating prana to, change your dreams or cheat death might sound a little far-fetched,
Right.
but it highlights this core idea in Tantra that what's going on inside us and what's going on in the world outside, they're not separate. They're totally connected.
So by changing how we feel inside through things like the G spot or this subtle breath stuff, we could actually be changing the world around us.
That's what they're saying. And it's something that modern science has started to look at too, quantum physics, consciousness studies, all that.
Mhm.
But long before scientists were even thinking about that stuff, you had these tantric practitioners working with these energies.
It's pretty amazing to think that these ancient practices might actually hold clues to solving mysteries that science is just starting to understand. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. How do these ideas actually help us in our everyday lives?
Right, that's the question, isn't it? And it's something that Osho actually addresses. He says that while the bigger picture stuff in Tantra, like being able to control your dreams or whatever, that's all interesting. The real power of these techniques is in how they can change our everyday experience.
So it's not really about becoming superhuman, but more about becoming, I don't know, more human.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really cool technique that Shiva talks about in the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, Sutra 14, where he talks about visualizing your spine.
Okay, yeah, I remember that one. It's about imagining this thread of energy running through your spine, right?
Yeah.
But how does that connect to everything else?
Well, think about it. We live in a world that's just constantly bombarding us with stuff. Our attention's pulled in a million directions. It's easy to totally lose touch with our bodies. We're just stuck in our heads all the time.
Oh, yeah, tell me about it. I feel like I spend half my life staring at screens.
Exactly. And that's where this technique comes in. When we visualize our spine, we're bringing our awareness back into our body, back into the present moment.
So it's kind of like an anchor for our attention, a way to ground ourselves.
Exactly. And it's a practice that can really change things. When we're more grounded in our bodies, we're less likely to get carried away by our anxious thoughts. We can be more present with others, more able to just enjoy being alive.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see how that would be valuable. It's like mindfulness, but in your body.
Exactly. And it's something anyone can do.
Yeah.
But again, this is just one example of how the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra gives us practical ways to deal with the challenges of, being alive today.
It's fascinating because this text might seem kind of, I don't know, out there on the surface, but it's actually full of useful wisdom that anyone who wants to be more conscious, more in their body, and, just live a more fulfilling life could use.
Exactly. And we've only just scratched the surface.
It's true, we've barely even dipped our toes in. And I gotta say, even just what we've talked about already, it feels like these techniques could really help us deal with, the craziness of life these days.
They really can. It's like this text is, I don't know, giving us the instructions for a different way of experiencing things, like one where our breath isn't just something we do automatically, but like this portal to something more.
And it's not just about the breath, right? It's about bringing that same kind of focus, like we talked about with the G-spot, to everything, every little thing we experience.
Exactly. And Sutra 20 is a really good example of this. Shiva talks about, get this, reversing the flow of your memories.
Yeah, okay. The time-traveling memory trick. Even knowing what I know now, that one still sounds a little out there.
It does, right. But think about how often we get stuck in the past.
Hmm.
Replaying old hurts, regrets, all that.
Oh, all the time. It's like my brain's default setting is just rehashing everything.
And that's exactly what this technique is trying to address. It's not about literally like going back in time. It's about changing how we relate to our past, breaking free from those thought patterns that keep us stuck.
So instead of letting our past control us, we learn to look at it in a new way, from a different perspective.
Yeah. And when we do that, we're free to experience right now with more clarity, more awareness, ultimately with more freedom.
Like hitting the reset button on our own story.
That's a great way to put it. And it comes back to this core idea in Tantra that we're not just along for the ride, we're actually creating our reality.
I'm starting to really see how powerful these techniques can be. It's not just about, reaching enlightenment in some abstract way. It's about actually changing how we live, how we experience ourselves, how we experience the world.
Exactly. And that brings us to Sutra 25, which is a really good reminder that we should approach everything, even the little boring stuff, with love, with presence, with awareness.
Right, finding the amazing in the everyday, seeing every moment as a chance for deeper awareness.
Exactly. It's about putting consciousness into everything we do, turning the ordinary into something sacred.
I love that. It reminds us that enlightenment isn't some far-off goal, but something we can experience right here, right now. Whether we're, I don't know, stuck in traffic or meditating, there's always a chance to wake up.
Totally. And that's the beauty of the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra. It gives us a path, a new way of seeing
Yeah.
that can turn the ordinary into the extraordinary.
Wow. Feeling super inspired right now. As we wrap up, I just want to say thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
Me too. It's been awesome exploring all this with you.
And for everyone listening, I really encourage you to check out the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra for yourself. You might be surprised by what you find, not just about, the universe and all that, but about yourself, about what you're truly capable of.
And remember, it all starts with a single breath. Pay attention to the little pauses, the shifts, all of it. You might be surprised what you find.
On that note, we'll leave you to explore your own depths. Until next time, keep breathing, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.